It was nearly the end of Dase's usual workday. However, Kunikida had begun this new tardy system. For every minute Dase had arrived late to work, he would have to stay an extra 15 at the end of the day. Today, he was 5 minutes late. What Kunikida didn't know though was that Dase had woken up to a pretty rough morning. I mean, an argument with his husband, losing his house keys, that closed off street that made him take a 3 minute detour. All of it, it was a horrible, horrible morning. And in his head were the calming thoughts of being home in his safe space. He wanted to regress, slip into his younger carefree mindset of peace and calm and be loved by his tiny redhead husband. Those ideas just made the feelings worse, of course, because he felt himself beginning to slip. And now he couldn't focus on the big boy work Kunikida wanted so meaningly was so meaningly forcing him to do. Honestly, poor Dazai. So sure, Dazai's reaction to the following was uncalled for, but can you blame him? He was only a child. Of course, Kunikida had no idea just how much the words he'd just shared would hurt the boy. He wasn't aware that Daze was regressed. The man was so dense, so old-fashioned, so new to this sort of thing, he just couldn't yet notice the differences in behavior from Dazai. A pout formed on the lips of the messy, curly-haired brunette. He let out a huff, putting his forehead to his desk. Kunikida rolled his eyes with a sigh, turning around to walk away. He mumbled. He was in a bad mood, a really bad mood. There, the yellow-haired man left, leaving the regressed boy alone. It didn't take long before the tears began to roll down his face. Osamu Dazai did not like being yelled at. He didn't move, not for his work, not for home. He just cried. He didn't know any better. Mentally, he was only a child. The entire agency knew about the boy's age regression. They had all found out a few months ago. Only one person in the ADA ever acknowledged this side of him, though. Not because they were mean, but because they never really paid attention to that switch in his personality. Maybe it was subtle, but most times his behavior really did resemble one of a child's. It was a coping mechanism. Of course it would. A soft, gentle voice was heard to the side of Dazai's desk. It caught the boy's attention instantly. Ranpo waved a lollipop in front of the boy. The mental child's eyes practically glowed. Ranpo smiled. The boy was almost already distracted by Ranpo, but was back in tears the second an alarm went off. There was an alarm in the room set up to go off after every start of a shift, break, lunch, and end of a shift. Dazu remembered that at this time of day Chuuya would be at home cooking something for dinner or waiting for him on the couch. The boy began to cry again. This time, actually cries instead of his silent tears. He wanted to go home. He wanted Chuuya. By now, Kunikida was well aware of the situation at hand and felt terrible for scolding him. He knew very well that even without the regression, Dazu behaved childishly and immaturely just like Ranpo. Everyone respected Ranpo, but many disregarded Dazai. He was a scapegoat in the ADA. Many blamed him when in reality, like Ranpo, he was smart, well educated, and just trying to heal his inner child. And it wasn't like the boy was entirely useless. He provided for the agency through many things that were always overlooked. Kunikida knew about them. Dazai was his partner, but he always forgot. Even when he'd tell himself, he'd cut the guy some slack. Ranpo smiled encouragingly. He held up his hand, which made Dazai's tears come to a minimum. not distracted with the high five. Kunikida offered, making his way to the break room. Many at the agency knew Dazai was married, and to Chuuya. Kunikida was not one of them. He had only just discovered Dazai was even seeing someone, and that the special someone was a guy. Instead, the leader grabbed his satchel and made his way to the president's floor, most likely taking his leave after. Dazai asked, making an imaginary phone out of his right hand, pointing to the elevator with his other. The regressed boy clapped his hands together happily. Ranpo smiled, standing up and ruffling Dazai's hair playfully. Ranpo leaned in to tickle the boy's sides, resulting in a fit of giggles from the mentally younger boy. Allowing the boy to catch his breath, Ranpo led him over the break room where he gave the boy a lollipop. What child didn't like candy? Every child likes candy. Dazai's eyes practically popped out of his head as Chuuya peeked his head into the room. Giggles came from the brunette as Chuuya approached them. He opened up his arms to his caregiver anxiously. Chuuya was quick to swoop him up out of the chair and hold a significantly taller husband on his hip with a gentle smile. He kissed the top of Dazai's head, making the boy lean into the touch. It was true. Regressed Dazai was much more mellow and well-behaved. He picked up Dazai's bag and made his way to the door. Dazai made a little wave on his way out, and Ranpo returned it with a smile. It was odd to see such a kind and gentle side of Chuuya. Even to Ranpo, who saw this part of Chuuya quite a few times already, and knew he wasn't all that of a mean guy. Many were just accustomed to the short-tempered ginger who liked to cause fights and bickers. Chuuya buckled up Dazai in the car and began their drive away from the agency office. He asked curiously. The boy let out a squeal of excitement, followed by happy hand claps. Chuuya already began pulling out her contact on the car screen, and Dazai happily squealed, pressing the call button. After very few seconds, she answered. Although Koyo and Dazai weren't ones to have conversations, their bond was strong when Dazai was regressed. She was almost like a parental figure for the boy, although they had only really begun to bond over the last year or so. Koyo was such a sweetheart with all the kids. She loved bringing smiles to people's faces. She was often the one to watch over regressed Dazai when Chuuya couldn't. Of course, Hirotsu was also a very admired babysitter. While the grown-up conversation went on, Dazai spit out his now plain lollipop stick. He searched through the glove compartments of Chuuya's car until he found his pacifier and shoved it into his mouth. Chuuya froze for a second, and then sighed. The brunette wasn't pleased, but complied, pushing the pacifier out of his mouth with his tongue. Dazai clapped his hands excitedly and quickly took the new soother into his mouth. Chuuya only shook his head with a slight smile as he put the other one in a cup holder, Koyo laughed. This enhanced her laughs. Rarely did Daza and Hirotsu have schedules that aligned. Lately, one of them was always busy. Dazai was quick to slide out of his belt and open the door to the car. Tears welled up in the boy's eyes as he shook his head no, chewing the soother faster. Dazai shook his head. Dazai nodded. It was odd to Chuuya since Dazai wasn't one who liked to wear his little gear in public. He always feared it made himself look weaker. He shrugged it off. Dazai felt more accepted with the people he knew in the mafia. Most people.